This is the heartbreaking story of a 21-year-old woman who became a mother at an early age, only to abandon her child a few months after he was born. The young mother you'll be reading about is Lucia, the daughter of one of the biggest rich men in Chile. Lucia was a very spoiled girl and always had things her way since her very young age. She was a typical rich girl who would go around humiliating people, sleeping with whomever she wanted, drinking all night long and waking up with crazy hangovers. But that lifestyle wasn't going to last forever, as everything would change the day she was blessed with a baby she wasn't expecting. Lucia has always thought that her money allowed her to humiliate anyone who crossed her path. Her riches were also a result of her mother's jewelry stores in Chile. Lucia spent her childhood and early youth in an immense mansion. Her disrespectful and rude traits were shared with her parents. They would often enjoy insulting their domestic employees, who often remained silent for fear that they might be fired. Monday would arrive when the Andradas had come from a business trip from the Caribbean to find their house in a huge mess. Lucia's mother, Clemencia, immediately went to the gardener, a very humble old man, and yelled at him for what happened to her garden. The woman called him all kinds of names in rage and frustration. The old gardener, who was very scared of her temper, replied calmly that he had nothing to do with what happened to her garden. The old man told her that it was actually her daughter, Lucia, who partied all night with her friends, leaving everything a mess. Clemencia snapped at him and called him a liar, straight after which she fired him and ordered him to get out of her house. Right after she fired her only gardener, she screamed to all of her staff to let her know if they knew of any decent gardener, as she needed one immediately. The chef of her kitchen, who had a young son fit for the job, decided to talk to him and convince him to apply for the job. Her only condition was that he doesn't mention that he was her son. Fernando was a 20-year-old man with an attractive physique and good looks that left all the girls stunned wherever he went. Following his mother's request, he got to the mansion and applied for the job. When Clemencia saw him, she was impressed with his looks and decided to offer him the job. She explained to him in details what she wanted in the garden. Few weeks later, Clemencia and her husband left the mansion to go on vacation, leaving their daughter alone to do whatever she wanted. On Saturday morning, Fernando would get to work right when Lucia got out of a taxi very dizzy and drunk. Seeing him at her front step, she yelled at him all dizzy, asking what he was doing at her house. Fernando told her that he was actually the new gardener and that was his first day there. Shocked by the news that such a handsome man would work for her parents, she decided to cancel any meeting she had, and she said to herself, "I'll take this one to bed." Fernando, very attracted to the beautiful wild Lucia, fell right into her clutches. He ended up being intimate with her, and right after he fulfilled his mission with her, she kicked him out of the mansion. A few days after her wild morning would pass before Lucia received what she said was the saddest news of her life. Her parents' private flight unfortunately had crashed into the sea, and the young girl was orphaned, losing both parents at once. After her parents died, she became the owner of their entire fortune. The funeral was private. The young girl did not want any condolences. All she wanted was to be left alone. When the house chef saw that Lucia was alone, she decided to approach her. She told her that she made her a comforting hot soup. Lucia, livid and hardly standing straight, told her chef that she was actually nauseated and wasn't feeling well at all. Germana, the cook, got very scared and asked Lucia if there were any chances she'd be pregnant. However, weeks have passed and Lucia hadn't had her period. When she finally had the courage to get tested, she found out that she was pregnant. She was very upset at the news, especially that the last man she'd been with was the gardener. When she got home, Lucia immediately called the chef and told her that she didn't want to keep the baby. The chef held her and told her that the baby was a gift from God, one she can't just throw away. Lucia was moved with her words and reconsidered her stance. She accepted to have the baby only to give up for adoption. "I don't want them to know that my son's father was a gardener." When Germana heard that, her heart froze as she realized what had happened with her son. 9 months would come and the Germana, who kept silent all that time, assisted Lucia in every step and even took her to the hospital when she was due. Lucia gave birth to a beautiful baby named Matteo. Guillermina decided to stay in the house when she saw that the little baby was her grandson. The chef couldn't help but notice that Lucia did not care for the baby, much less breastfeed him. Few weeks passed and Lucia had returned to the parties. At one of her parties, she met a very handsome but arrogant young man she brought home one night for a hookup. When the man saw the baby, he snapped at her. "You told me you had no children. Then whose baby is that?" Lucia, scared of losing her nightstand, told him that he was the worker's baby and that he'd stay in this crib. Lucia decided to take the little baby and put him in a sink with dishes. Hours passed and Lucia had been fulfilling her fantasies even if little Matteo was crying. When she got home, Germana saw that the baby was on the verge of drowning. His body was very cold and he almost turned blue. The next morning, Germana told Lucia that her son was extremely sick and it wasn't the first time he'd get that bad. Lucia snapped at her and told her to take the baby and give him up for adoption as she never wanted him in the first place. Germana took the little baby who reminded her very much of her deceased son Fernando, who died 3 months prior in a car accident. Because of the night he spent in the dish's water, the baby developed an eye disease that blinded him, but that was not an issue for Germana, who after a while would leave the mansion to go work in a private clinic run by good-hearted doctors who were very fond of the guy. When her grandson was 5 years old, she approached doctors about his eyes. She was hysterical and desperate. When the doctors saw her crying, he helped her with an open heart and told her that he wouldn't charge her for anything. As the years passed, Matteo became a great architect and would give his best to give back to his grandmother. One day during a regular medical visit, they entered the doctor's room while he was interviewing a woman. The woman turned around and talked to Germana. "Mina, is that you? How is your life going on? It is nice to see you. Who is that handsome boy next to you?" Germana was very scared and nervous when she found out who the woman was. She held her courage in 2 hands but told her that the boy was actually the son she rejected years ago. Lucia approached her son and asked him to forgive her. "Forgive me, son. I didn't know what I was doing. I was a very crazy young woman. Forgive me, please." The young man looked at her and said, "Ma'am, I forgive you, but I don't want to hear from you. My mother told me the truth, but I don't want to hear from you." He then called Germana and asked her to leave the place. Lucia lost her house and all of her fortune because of her lifestyle. She thought that money would last forever, and her irresponsibility made her not only lose her son but everything she ever had, destroying her parents' legacy and saying goodbye to everything she ever held dear. Parents often forget that providing financially for their children is not enough. They should rather give them the education they need to be decent human beings and handle life responsibly. Money does not last forever, and no fortune can ever withstand the recklessness of spoiled children who think that money is infinite.